Hi everyone, it is Ryan from Pin the World, and today I will be taking you along as I do some trip planning. So hopefully this is a useful, if not exciting, video for at least some of you. But this is something that I really enjoy, something that I geek out on, and something that I really pour myself into. It's half the fun of travel for me is doing the planning. So just thought I would take you along and sort of show you how I approach that. And I'll try to talk in more general terms overall, but I am going to use our upcoming Japan vacation as an example. So I will be talking about that plenty as well. Just to call out, I do have a few notes prepared, and we'll also be getting into the laptop. So I'll be doing some screen sharing to walk you through, a spreadsheet, a Word document, that sort of thing. So we will get into it. So I want to, use the 5W approach, I think it is, and throw in an H too. So we're going to talk about the who, what, where, when, why, and also the how. So we're going to start with the who. And in this case, and for Laura and I, it's very simple. We travel together. It's just the two of us. So that's an easy one. But I think when you're thinking about an upcoming trip, of course, knowing who you're planning to travel with is really important. Of course, if you have children, I imagine there's, they obviously have to be considered in terms of their entertainment, their need for breaks, things like that. And another example would be if there's someone in your party who has mobility issues, that's going to, need you to sort of deepen your planning to just make sure that all of their needs are accommodated for throughout. Like I said though, just Laura and I, that sort of keeps it simple and I suppose allows us to be a bit selfish in terms of what we're doing on our trip. Next up, we're going to dive into the how, or the how long of a trip. So I think the two go hand in hand. For us, one of the big questions at the onset of a trip is, are we going to fly or are we going to drive? And what sort of helps determine that is the how long. So how long do we have for this trip? And although I'm oversimplifying, I would say our trips generally fall into one of two categories. There's either the sort of long weekend, so like a three, or we're adding a few days, like 3, 4, 5 days, in which case if that's all the time that we have, we're probably gonna just choose to drive somewhere. For us, we're probably looking at like a 10-hour radius around our house, which includes some great destinations in Canada as well as the US. And part of the reason for that is I grew up doing driving trips with my parents a lot, and I love that. I have the patience for it. It's something I still really enjoy. So the thought of embarking on a 10 or even longer drive in 10-hour or longer drive in one day doesn't really scare me. If you're only going away for like 4 or 5 days kind of thing, you probably do want to get there in one day and return in one day. So some examples of trips like this that we've done, most recently we've logged it. We went to New York City for Christmas. That was only 4 days. So it was like, when you think about how many nights you are away for, if you're away for 3 nights, that means you only have 2 full days. If you're away for 5 nights, that means you only have 4 full days, because the first day and the last day are going to be taken up by travel. So just really quickly, some of the other great sort of long weekend-ish driving vacations we've gotten to do, Chicago, Quebec City, Montreal, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. We went to Columbus recently. We want to go to Washington, D.C. and Boston. Those are definitely on the list. We've done Nashville before for sort of an extra long weekend. So lots of great options. So as I said, when thinking about the how long, that's one category. It's either that sort of like long weekend trip, or it's going to be like a week plus, I'll say. So maybe we're going away for a week or two. In that case, I feel like we have the time to, justify a flight, and then really anywhere is an option, just like Japan coming up. So we've discussed the who, the how, and the how long. Let's get into the where. In this case, the example that we're going through today in this video is Japan for us. So obviously deciding where you want to go is maybe the most obvious, and some would sort of think that's the first step. Like I said, I'm sort of starting, like we've listed out constraints, thinking about who you're traveling with, because that can, depending on their needs, take some destinations off the list. It's just not an option, or not an easy option. And how much time you have as well, because if it's only a long weekend, you're probably not flying to Japan and back. So the where in this case, we were looking for something that would allow us to stretch our legs, get a little further out of our comfort zone than sort of like domestic or North America travel. We wanted a good mix of urban exploration and beautiful nature and history. We wanted something that's, it's fairly easy once you're there. There's great travel infrastructure in Japan, great, public transportation and everything. I've, in my past, gotten to a few more exotic destinations in Asia, like the Philippines comes to mind. Beautiful, beautiful spot, and I'd love to return, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend going to like Manila for like a first big international trip, just because it is probably a bit more advanced level than something like Japan or South Korea or Europe, where you'll have some level of familiarity if you're coming from Canada or the United States. And just a great mix of activities for us in Japan as well. There's a Disney park, of course, which we'll be going to. We're looking really forward to. But like I said, there is that great, cities to be explored, but then temples and ancient history as well, which is going to be a really interesting mix. You'll have sort of the past and then the future, it'll feel like, I think. So now that we've decided on where we're going, I guess the next question would be, when are we going? So this is, again, there's lots of constraints to consider here. It's your vacation time at work, assuming you're employed and maybe not retired yet, or just independently wealthy. Wouldn't that be nice? But yeah, we have to consider our vacation time, both the the amount of time that we have per year and when we can actually take it. Sometimes you can combine it with a public holiday to sort of get a free day in there and give you an extra day of travel for your vacation, which is really nice. You have to consider, of course, the time of year or the season, both in terms of where you're departing from and where you're heading to. For instance, for Japan, we're traveling in the fall. I'm feeling pretty comfortable about that in terms of like the weather in Canada and Japan should be pretty moderate. Like we won't have to worry about snow yet or anything like that. So that should lessen the chance of like flight delays and internal travel headaches. That's what I'm hoping. So fall is also beautiful, of course. We didn't want to go in the summer because we've traveled in the summer a lot. It's very hot, very humid in Japan, so we wanted to avoid that. We've been to Florida a lot in the summers too, and now that Laura's not in the education industry, we don't want to go back to Florida in the summers. Miss the heat and humidity and hurricane season, so natural disasters and the seasonality of that, if where you're going has sort of hurricane or typhoon season, or just a rainy season in general. Even thinking about the length of day. So when we're in Japan, it'll be getting dark probably around 5:30 at night. So that was a consideration, especially when we're in places like Kyoto and there's lots of temples to explore. Just being aware that we won't be able to do that until 9 o'clock at night, because some of them their hours are sun up till sunset. And then other things to think about in terms of the win is just if you're planning your vacation around any particular festivals or events, expos. You know, Mary of the Siskatiers has been in Paris recently. Obviously, the Olympics was a big part of that, so that really dictated when she would be traveling. If you're going to like a Comic-Con or a concert or something like that, again, obviously, like you sort of have that fixed kind of date, so that it, in a way, makes things simpler because you don't have to consider the win so much. You just got that one option. And finally, another call out is just considering holidays at your destination. So if they have public holidays, for instance, in Japan, they have Sakura season, the cherry blossom season. That's typically in April, and it'll just, you know, it's going to be very, very busy for any internal travel. They have what I believe is called like Obon season, where it's customary for everybody to sort of return to their ancestral villages, like where they came from, their roots. So again, it's, you know, if you're traveling at that time, hotels are going to be more expensive and harder to come by. Train tickets are going to have to be pre-booked far in advance. So just, you know, being aware where you're going, what kind of things are going on, or if they have public holidays, because you know, you might find if they have a public holiday on a Monday, for example, and it's like, oh, some of the things that you were hoping to do are actually going to be closed. So that's a great thing to look up. We're going to get into the what now and spin you around and have a look at the computer screen. By this point, like I said, we know it's Laura and I. We're going to Japan for 2 weeks in the fall. So at this point, the very first thing that I did, even before the spreadsheet, was, you know, we knew the who, the where, the when, and the how long. So I started checking into flights, and I actually used Google flight tracking to help me this time to try to find sort of the best, cheapest discounted time within our, you know, where we were, the window of time we were hoping to travel. And when I saw sort of those dates that I was hoping for come up with a good deal, it was time to strike. So we booked the flights. That was the very first step that we took, was just sort of booking the flights. And that allowed me to then begin this spreadsheet. So you're seeing it not at the beginning, but closer to an end state. So once we had those flights, we knew when we're arriving and when we're departing. It was like, all right, we know it's, you know, a 2-week trip. We know that we're going to have 13 full days in Japan, you know, and a day in advance when we'll be getting there. It'll actually take about 24 hours if you factor in the time change, and a day when we're departing. So once we had that time, I was able to sort of plot out like a trip day counter, I called it. I put the date. I've redacted that just sort of for our privacy, I suppose, and the day of the week. So that was the very first thing I did. And after that, it was really thinking about the route, what we want to do with our time in Japan. So I was, plotting out at a high level. We want to visit Disney. We knew that. We want to explore Tokyo, the largest city. We want to check out Kyoto. It's very famous and beautiful, and there's a lot of history there. And, have some time for some day trips as well. So making sure that we get to Osaka and Nara, which are all sort of, close by Kyoto. So another consideration was just not wanting to switch hotels as little as possible within reason. So you see, I have called out where we're sleeping each night. Again, for you guys, not where specifically. You'll get to see that eventually though. Right now it's just generic. And we'll be staying in technically 6 different hotels in 13 nights. It's going to be a lot. In a perfect world, it would be less. But like the Tokyo trip, as we explained in the Disney part of the trip, which we explained in our Disney video, those vacation packages are really restrictive. You can either do 1 night or 2 nights. We knew we wanted more time around Disney, so it's just going to unfortunately mean that we have to switch up hotels. So it is what it is. But yeah, just wanted to sort of show you that. So for me, the process is, knowing when you're arriving and when you're departing. That's sort of the set in stone kind of thing. And then you can start to think about the cities that you want to travel to within the country that you're going, and sort of the route that makes sense there. So I knew there was a public holiday, for instance. So the first thing that I plotted out was Disney, because we wanted to miss the public holiday, not because the park is closed, but because it'll be very busy. And we also wanted to avoid going on the weekend if possible. So knowing when we were flying in and flying out, and then knowing that we wanted to do Disney for 4 days, not on a weekend or a public holiday, that was sort of the first thing to plot. And then it was, are we going to do Tokyo sort of before and after, or Kyoto? Do we want to start there? We're flying in and out of Tokyo, so you have to consider that getting to Kyoto is like a 2 or 3 hour train ride. So it's just really a matter of just plotting it out. But the more things that are set in stone, like that Disney vacation package, that was the second big thing that we booked after the flights, then it becomes easier to fill in the blanks. As far as hotels in Tokyo, I wanted to stay in 2 different areas, because we'll have a couple nights in Tokyo at the beginning of our trip and then a few at the end. That's just how it made sense, and I thought it was a good opportunity to, because Tokyo is so large and so sprawling, stay in 2 different hotels, one at the beginning of the trip and a different one at the end, so that we would be closer to different attractions, and we would do sort of organization based on that. So this spreadsheet, like I said, I love this stuff. I geek out about it. I'm considering the beginning of the trip, we wanted to stay around Tokyo Station or Ginza. So here's a list of sort of eligible hotels that I was looking at. I find these on TripAdvisor a lot of the time. I'm considering their ranking from Google, their ranking from Booking.com. I'm thinking about their cost in yen, how many transit or subway stations are close by, how many lines they service, and things like that. And sort of same goes for Shinjuku, where we'll be spending a few nights at the end of the trip. Kyoto, it was a very similar kind of thing. I put down a lot of hotels. Do we want to stay by Kyoto Station, or do we want to stay sort of in the Gion district north of Kyoto Station? Again, thinking about the prices, the rankings. One of these hotels was actually closing before we're arriving. One of them wasn't all non-smoking, so that was something that's important to us. So then it really just becomes, you have your short list and just make your decision and hope for the best. You can definitely get into analysis paralysis. Things to see. Through doing my research, spending time on TripAdvisor, looking at guidebooks, and because I had been to Japan myself 15 years ago before Laura, I had some idea. So in each city, Kyoto, Nara, Osaka, Tokyo, different popular attractions. So I'm calling out what the attractions are, which area they're located in, and then thinking about an order that makes sense for how you would want to geographically manage your day. Also some things that, it makes sense to pair this with that because they're very close to each other. Some things are best to check out in the morning, other things in the evening. So just calling out those notes. I like my spreadsheets, but I also sometimes like a Word document. I've spent most of the time in Excel and the spreadsheet, but this is something else that I wanted to put together. This is more handy. This is like something we could print or, have that we can pull up on our phone easily enough. So just a different view. It's maybe a bit easier to digest on the eyes. Again, I've blanked out some information, so that's specific dates that would be in the black bars, and then I've just made the hotels sort of generic. But like I said, I've been spending some time once we knew our dates, and especially it was helpful once we had Disney nailed down. Then it was thinking about the other cities that we would go to, playing around with the order to try to minimize time in transit and sort of wasting time, sort of going back and forth. And it was then taking all those attractions in the spreadsheet and sort of plotting them out and putting them in an order that made sense. And sometimes that was based on the time that things are open, days when things are closed, but a lot of time spent in Google Maps just coming up with an order that makes sense. And I've got everything just about nailed down. One thing that was tricky, for example, is this market that we want to visit in Tokyo. It's closed on Sundays, but also national holidays, and it also wraps up pretty early in the afternoon. And our Tokyo days, at the beginning of the trip when we'll be in that area, well, we're there on the weekend at the start, so that's not going to work well for the market. So really the only option is to throw it in at the end of the trip, but it's a little bit painful for me because it's on the opposite end of town versus where we're staying. For example, at the end of the trip, we're staying in the Shinjuku area of Tokyo, and therefore I've tried to plot in Shinjuku area attractions for the most part. At the beginning of the trip, when we're in the Ginza area, I'm throwing in attractions that are somewhat near to that area. That said, at the end of the trip, if we really want to get to that market, it's just a subway ride. It's not the end of the world, but I do just try to optimize so that we have more time at attractions and less time in transit. Oh, hey there, I'm back again. So hopefully that wasn't too mind-numbing for you, all that time in the computer. Again, I know this is... Some would view this as quite excessive planning. I think this, like I said though, it's just not work for me. It's something that I personally enjoy, so I don't mind going a bit overboard on it. And sometimes even if Laura is rolling her eyes at me a bit, my sort of defense is like, my worst fear is getting back from a vacation, getting back from Japan in this case, and talking to somebody about our trip and them saying, hey, well, you were there, did you check out this like world famous attraction or something that sounds really cool? And I'd be like, no, I didn't even know about that. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know it was there. So like, what a wasted opportunity, right? So I definitely like to do the research to make sure we're not missing out on anything that we want to see, to make sure that we have options, especially if it's like a rainy day and we want to have some cool things that we can do inside, just so we don't have to sort of panic in the moment and waste time or do something that's not a top tier attraction when we could be doing something really, really cool instead. So the final question of our 5 W's and the H, the how, that's the why. Why travel, I suppose. Again, this is, maybe I'm oversimplifying, but I sort of see going away as fitting into one of 2 categories. It would be either you're going on a holiday or you're traveling. And I think there's a difference between those two. I think both are completely valid, and one trip can have a combination of the two. But if you're going on a holiday, that's more maybe because you want to go somewhere and just have fun and not really have to think about it or plan too hard. You need a break, you want to relax. So if you're, going for fun in the sun and you're going to sit on a beach for a week in Jamaica, again, that sounds awesome. To me, that's more of a holiday. You might not be leaving the resort much or exploring the country or getting to see much of the culture or how local people live their lives. Same goes for if Disney World, actually, you just sort of have to show up and you're gonna have a great time, but to me it just doesn't constitute travel. Vegas is probably another good example. Again, you just all you have to do is arrive and it'll sort of all work out kind of thing. And I'm not knocking it. We've done plenty of those trips ourselves. We love it. This Japan trip, I would say it definitely falls more in the travel category, not so much like the holiday kind of category to me. We will have that Disney portion, yes, but as I've shown, it's we're putting in a lot of work. Yes, I guess you could just land in a country like Japan and sort of wing it. But yeah, we're going to be seeing an awful lot. We're going to be having a lot of different experiences, trying to immerse ourselves in the culture, eating Japanese food. you know, understanding more about their history, their language, going to important historical sites and things like that. So this is the kind of thing where I might joke after this this travel trip, you know, we need a vacation. It would be great to come back from Japan and then turn around and go to Jamaica and sit on a beach for a week and just sort of relax, because this will not be a relaxing or restful trip. But in either case, very worthwhile. I think it's such an important endeavor to want to see the world, to continue to adventure, explore, and have new experiences. And all the better when you get to do it with someone you love, like Laura and I. So really looking forward to this one. Thank you so much for your attention. If you've made it this far, feel free to ask me anything in the comments below if you want to talk about trip planning or you know, any of the destinations that I've called out. If we've been there in the past, I probably have spreadsheets and Word documents about those places. They might be a bit outdated. I'd still be happy to share them though. So yeah, I think that is that. We will put a wrap on this video, but thank you so much.